Before we'll compare the old-fashioned scooping technique that your goalkeeper coach is probably still teaching you with the modern style that all of the pros are using, let's first have a look at the proper scooping technique that has helped me incredibly to improve my performance on the field. In order to make it as easy as possible for you to understand the scooping technique, I split it up into two parts. Firstly, we're gonna have a look at the movement of our lower body part, and then we're also checking out the upper body movement. The most important part of the lower body movement is the footwork, and therefore I split up the following picture into three zones. Each of those zones require a slightly differentiating technique. Let's have a look. In zone number 1, we use the so-called split technique. And this means that if the ball is shot in the very center, we focus on increasing the distance between our feet by doing a split. The split has the advantage that we can decrease the height of our upper body very fastly. And this makes it eventually much easier to catch the ball safely. The technique required for zone number 2 varies a lot from the split technique. I call this technique the step technique because you do a step with the foot to the side where the ball is being shot at. As you can see in the video, the ball is played to the right, and so my right foot moves towards this direction. Very importantly, the outside foot stays at the same spot than during your basic positioning. The technique for zone number 2 is actually quite simple, if you reduce unnecessary movement such as moving the outside foot away from the direction of the shot. Balls that are shot towards zone number 3 and even further require totally different footwork again. I want you to follow the approach to cover as much ground as possible with the scooping technique. For balls exactly being shot in zone number 3, we use the so-called shuffle technique to increase our range. Therefore, our outside foot first moves a little bit towards the center before the inside foot starts moving. After this shuffle step, you should land with both feet and get set to catch the ball with the scooping technique. If the ball is being shot even further than zone number 3, we use the cross step. And the cross step is basically not a lot different than the shuffle, except that the outside foot actually crosses over the inside foot. And therefore we simply increase the distance of our motion. The shuffle or cross step technique should just be used if the ball is being shot from a further distance, because the additional step takes quite some time. If you don't have enough time to do the additional shuffle or cross step, you should just rely on the previously learned low diving technique. You can find this video up here. At the beginning of part number 2, we will focus on the right movement of our chest before we'll have a look at the proper arm positioning, which many keepers are doing significantly wrong. As soon as the ball gets close to you, you need to decrease the height of your chest as much as possible by leaning forward and moving the chest over the ball. As you can see in the video, my chest moved extremely far forward, so that it's even in front of all of my lower body parts. This extremely low and lean forward positioning makes it very easy to catch the ball safely. Now we are coming to the most important part of the scooping technique, the proper arm positioning. And doing a mistake in the arm positioning often leads to really embarrassing mistakes. But I will show you now how to prevent it. As soon as the chest is in a low and lean forward position, you now need to make sure to move your hands towards the ball. And this offensive movement makes it easier for you to absorb the speed of the shot by moving your hands simultaneously backwards. But right before the ball is being touched by your hands, we need to focus on the most important piece of this technique, your elbows. In order to prevent the ball sliding through your arms, you need to minimize the distance between your two elbows. And this little detail also brings your hands in a perfect positioning and eases the actual scoop of letting the ball roll into your arms. Before we'll go into depth why the old-fashioned scooping technique is so much more less effective than the modern one, I first want to say that 10 or 20 years ago a lot more goalkeepers were doing mistakes when they were trying to scoop a ball. The most famous example was probably happening in the final of the World Cup in 2002 between Brazil and Germany. In the 22nd minute, Oliver Kahn wasn't able to save a central shot from distance safely. And this gave the opportunity to the Brazilian striker Ronaldo to score from a rebound. Personally, I don't think that this mistake was caused by a lack of concentration or simply a blackout. I believe that it was simply the technique that he was using at that time. The old-fashioned scooping technique follows the idea of dropping one knee to the ground in order to prevent the ball sliding through your hands. And as you can see in the video, I'm now trying to simulate exactly this technique. The first disadvantage of the old-fashioned scooping technique is that as soon as you drop one knee towards the ground, it is very difficult to bring the upper body over the ball, because the knee simply blocks this movement. The second disadvantage is that in case the ball bounces differently than you were expecting, it is simply very difficult to adjust your body again, because you're in a very low positioning. In addition, as soon as the knee drops to the ground, it also limits the movement of your arms and your elbows. While it is very difficult to decrease the distance between your elbows, you will also experience a massive limitation between the left and right movement of your arms. Since we have just talked about all of the disadvantages of the old scooping technique, let's now have a look at the advantages of the modern scooping technique that all of the pros are using today. Just from looking at the positioning, you can already see that everything seems so much more easy and so much more relaxed. Overall, the modern scooping technique combines technical aspects with the freedom of movement, and exactly this mix prepares you perfectly for every single situation that you can be facing when you are using the scooping technique. My goal with the GKeeping channel is to help as many goalkeepers as possible in their technical and tactical development. And that's the reason why I invite you now to become part of the GKeeping community. But first of all, you gotta hit that subscribe button down there. You should also check out my other social media pages. I post sometimes slightly different content on there, and that's the reason why it's really good to be part of that as well. You can find the links in the description.